Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Dr. Manon.
All right, so welcome to the Healers Café. And today I have the pleasure to have an interview with Dr. Bob Baker. And let me read a little bit his bio. So
you're going to embarrass me now, Manon.
Well, I was so surprised when I read it. It's quite amazing. So he's the author of The Performance of Medicine, Techniques from the Stage to Optimize the Patient Experience and Restore the Joy of Practicing Medicine. He has a special interest in the doctor-patient relationship and served as the physician master facilitator for the Culture of Care Initiative of Northwell Health, one of the largest healthcare systems in the USA. Dr. Baker attended Princeton University and got his MD from the Columbia College of Physicians and Surgeons. He trained at Weill Cornell Medical Center and did his GI fellowship at Beth Israel Hospital in Boston. He is also a professional magician and ventriloquist. We definitely have to have you do that on the show, and is the only Princeton, Columbian, Cornell, Harvard trained physician to have appeared on America's Got Talent. So welcome, and my goodness, that is quite a path. So
not your typical doctor's biography.
No, it's actually very exciting. But let's go back, just for fun. What before I find out what changed and why you got interested in all of this and these forms of kind of art and communication, but what was it that got you into medicine in the first place?
Well, I always had an interest in science ever since I was young, but I think one of the major inspirations was my childhood pediatrician when I lived outside Chicago, Illinois. His name was Dr. Elmer Caddison, and when I was young, I got frequent ear infections. Mm-hmm. And I distinctly remember one time, I must have been 6 or 7 years old, when Dr. Caddison came to the house in the middle of the night with his overcoat thrown on over his pajamas. Just jumped out of bed and came on a middle of the night house call. And he was wonderful. He was soothing. He gave me what in the Midwest we called a sucker, which many other people call lollipops to soothe my throat. He gave me, he had some magical tetracycline in his bag, which is what they had in the 1950s,
right?
To give me. And he was so wonderful. I remember thinking at the time, I want to be like him. And that was really a driving force in my development. I always wanted to be a doctor, other than when I was 8 or 9 years old. I thought I wanted to be a railroad engineer. Probably there was a fireman in there at some place. But in the most part, I always wanted to be a doctor. The only side course I considered was being a professional magician. But that's an even harder life than being a doctor. So I decided let magic be my passion and my hobby. Let medicine be my other passion and my work.
Okay, so that's interesting. But so really, it was a relationship.
Yes, it was the feeling that I got from Dr. Caddison that he was more than just a guy who came and pulled a prescription out of his bag. He was soothing, he was gentle, and he was incredibly dedicated. So yes, it was a relationship. And add that to my love of science, my curiosity always in how things worked. I think wondering to know how things worked is what brought me to magic. Like, how do they do that? I need to know.
Okay.
Is not very far from how does the body work? I need to know.
Yeah, because there's still so many things we still don't know.
Some things. I always say there's much more that we don't know than we do know. And the more we learn, the more we realize that we have so much more to find out.
Yeah, no, and that's the shocking part for me as well. I sometimes just have no idea what the potential for the body really is. When you orchestrate everything you can, and the patient has the right circumstances, the right support, the right nutrition, the right mindset, the right medicine. When it's all together.
All those things work together, but it all starts with the patient, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So tell me more about that.
Okay.
Your experiences, yeah.
I've always felt, being both a magician and a doctor, I've always appreciated that there is an ancient relationship between magic and medicine. Everyone knows what the world's oldest profession is. That's sort of a joke, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if we ever stop to think, what's the world's second oldest profession? And I think it's probably magician/healer, or healer/magician. If you go way back, way back, thousands of years, probably the first healers were also magicians, and the first magicians were also healers. And I think that relationship has always been there. And that aspect of magic, which involves something which is almost intangible and makes us wonder, also carries over to medicine. I wonder about the human body all the time. The human body inspires me with tremendous wonder. And some of the things that I would see every single day in my practice struck me as almost magical. Sure, we understood the basic physiology, we understood a lot of what's going on, but there were things that we didn't understand. And that has always helped maintain the wonder of medicine. Even in performing magic, sometimes things happen in a standard magic show. You go, wow, I didn't really expect that. That's sort of magical the way that happened. So we don't always have complete control of what's going on there because we're dealing with an audience, and an audience, in a sense, is like a patient. And what we're doing in both circumstances is a performance. And so that's another way I feel those two things come together.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. I had never thought of that, but I can, now that you're saying that, there is an element, because in the methodology that I've created, I see in teaching it, you kind of demonstrate it. Mm-hmm. So it's a performance, and there's an audience, and there's an aspect that you don't know. Sure, it's to do with fascia. Sure, the body, I've seen it. I've done cases of frozen shoulder, or sciatica or whatever. I know it's based on something. It works, but there is that it's like an implicit. There's something.
Let me put it in words for you, if I may.
Yes.
So I think that what is the goal of any performer? It's to connect with the audience. That's what makes a performance, whether it's a speech or a magic performance or a singer or a dancer. Every performer is looking to connect with the audience. And if we think of the patient as our audience, we are also looking to connect. Mm-hmm. Because the healing process is so much more than the prescription. One of my partners said to me many, many years ago that the doctor visit is a kind of a ritual. It involves an authority figure wearing a certain costume, the white coat or whatever we wear. It involves the telling of a tale, the laying on of hands, the actual touching of a person. And the ritual is a vital part of the healing process. I am sure that you have had the experience, and many of your viewers and listeners have had the experience, as I have, is as the patient is walking out of the room, they say, something, I feel better already. Mm-hmm. And it's wonderful because they haven't filled the prescription, they haven't had the surgery, they haven't done anything except participate in the ritual. Mm-hmm. Something very powerful, indeed something magical there. And that's where I see performances coming in. There was also a great sociologist of the 20th century named Irving Goffman who wrote a book called The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. He makes the point that we're all performing all the time. And we all have, and all these performances are genuine. So for instance, when I am a father to my 7 kids, I'm a little bit of a different person from how I am when I am taking care of a patient. And I'm also a different person from how I am when I'm on stage in a comedy club. But they're all parts of me. They're all me. They're all authentic me. They're just different aspects of me. And Goffman said that a performance, and I'm going to simplify his language because his language is very flowery, but what he said was a performance is anything that we do in a given circumstance to influence another person. So on stage, what you do might be to influence them to laugh, or be happy, or be sad, or become engaged, or become terrified if it's a movie. A performance with our kids might be they do something which internally we think is really funny, but we can't laugh at it, so we play the stern and disapproving parent, right? Mm-hmm. A performance with a patient is giving ourselves to the patient, being open to them. It's a two-way communication. These are all different types of performances. And I think that also underlies the concept of the magic of the personal connection between people. We have all gone to the theater and been deeply affected emotionally, even physically, even spiritually, by something we have seen on stage, something we've been a part of on stage.
Yeah.
That's what every performer wants to do. And similarly, we've had that experience in the doctor's office of being engaged, of making that connection when it's just two people sitting face to face, talking. That's where the healing begins, in that moment. And that's wonderful. And we're starting to understand the science of it more.
Right.
It's a certain element of magic there as well.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you say that too. And I don't know what your opinion is currently with, you know, all of the electronics and all the data pieces and everyone typing away rather than writing and listening. You know, I even know, I mean, I'm in the naturopathic profession, and we do physical exams, but many of the patients that come in, like in BC, in British Columbia, we're the primary health care physicians for them. But they say that their GPs don't do physical exams
I know.
anymore.
I can't understand that, how they cannot do that, or they do it through
So
the
this
clothes.
is for real, because I kept thinking it can't be true.
So here's my thoughts on that.
Okay.
Because I'm actually working on a new speech called Magic in Medicine. I was thinking about technology. And of course, technology, even the most primitive technology, is always a two-edged sword. Go back 10,000 years. The first technology that humans learned to control was probably fire. Now, fire can be very helpful. It can keep the animals away at night. It can cook the food. But it can also burn the forest down where you're living. Interestingly enough, technology has often been thought to cause problems. When the stethoscope was first invented, there were people who were concerned that it would take the doctor away from the patient, because instead of putting the ear right on the chest, there was suddenly something between the doctor and the patient, which was inhibiting that relationship. Turned out not to be true, but that was expressed at the time. And going back to what you said before, I'm absolutely certain that the technology that we have today is wonderful in many ways, but it absolutely comes between us. And one of the sections in my book, The Performance of Medicine, that I talk about is how to deal with the computer, how to keep that piece of machinery, which can be so incredibly valuable, from coming between you and the patient. And what concerns me in trends that we're seeing today is towards telemedicine. Now, I understand that telemedicine can be wonderful. If you are living in a rural area and there's no doctor within 20 miles and you need to see someone, it's a great thing. It brings the doctor virtually into your home. I can sort of see it if you live in an area which has a plentiful supply of physicians, but you can't make it in that day. So maybe you can do something. But what it takes away is the human contact. And as medicine, and all branches of medicine, yours, mine, becomes more and more technologically involved, whether it's therapies which are now geared towards some genetic analysis of your DNA, that this will work for you, but that won't because you have this gene here and that allele there. As all of it becomes more and more technical, what I fear is that we will lose the basis of medicine, which, to say again, is that person-to-person contact. That's where the healing begins. And I think it's crucial, essential, that we never let this marvelous tool come between us. And take an example of another marvelous tool. Do you remember how social media was first said? It's going to bring the world together. That's what Mark Zuckerberg said about Facebook. I'm going to bring the world together. Hasn't worked out that way, has it?
Not completely.
Because technology is very much of a two-edged sword, and the usefulness of it depends entirely on the people who use it.
Yeah.
And how they use it. And it is up to us as doctors and physicians and healers and naturopaths, chiropractors, all of us, to keep that human element in there. I mean, can you imagine, for instance, a chiropractor seeing a patient without touching them? It's impossible. Can't be done, right? I mean, they have to manipulate.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the Bowen method being done without touching? Can't be done. That will never be done by telemedicine. It can't be. You need that human interaction, that human touch. So that's why I say I welcome the technology, but let's not let us let it come between the patients and us.
And I think it's also the risk of all these, these tests, as opposed to simplifying things sometimes, like using a stethoscope. You send people for an ECG, and then you do this, and then you do that. And basically they're in all of this technology, but you haven't really heard the problem.
Correct.
You haven't heard.
You haven't talked to the patient.
Yeah.
You walk, I see doctors come in, they're leafing through the lab data before they say anything to the patient. First, find out about the patient, his or her life, what's going on, what they're experiencing. If you don't get to that, you don't learn anything about the patient. I don't mean this to be a boastful thing, but I'll tell you that in my career as a gastroenterologist, I had many people come to me who had seen one GI doctor after another, one GI doctor after another. They weren't getting better. And I'd listen to them for a little while, and then I'd say, well, what's going on in your life? What's happening outside this office? And then it comes out, it's stress or death in the family, or what they're eating, or their lack of exercise. There are a million other things. And once you address those, then golly gee, the GI symptoms get better. How about that? And we can't forget that it's a human being there who's affected by the environment and the diet and their exercise and how much sleep they get and what's going on in their personal lives and what's going on in their inner life. All those things affect our health. You have to remember that.
Yeah. No, and it's interesting because it's the GI specialists that were really, from my understanding, the first to realize that there is a mental emotional component to physical ailments.
More than I've said in my speeches to gastroenterologists, that more than in any other branch of internal medicine, cardiology and endocrinology and rheumatology, the mind-body connection and the patient's life affects the digestive tract more than say it affects the heart or the glands or whatever. It's, as I'm sure you know, the digestive tract has its own so-called enteric nervous system, which is as complicated down here as the brain is up there. And the enteric nervous system can operate independently of the brain. So it's the gut has its own brain, but the two brains, as it were, interact all the time. I mean, there are neurochemicals up here, which normally are found down here, and vice versa. So there's tremendous interaction there, which we can't ignore. And you're right. Gastroenterologists, I think, were among the first to recognize that. So yay us.
But I remember when I was studying homeopathic medicine that some of the doctors who contributed to the research of that were GI specialists, and they were saying there is definitely a connection here, and now that we understand neurotransmitters and the importance of the health of the gut, it's all like the proof is coming, but the patients always knew it on some level. On some
level. Our job is to bring that out and let them recognize it.
No, it's an interesting. I wrote, I won't take long telling you this, but I wrote a book called What Patients Don't Say If Doctors Don't Ask. And that was 5 years ago, the mindful doctor-patient relationship. And I said, the problem I'm seeing is we're not spending. So I was doing a criticism on the SOAP formula, which P instead of plan is a prescription, which really it should be a plan. What is the plan of action? And S is pretty well lost. It's like tolerance of, okay, sure, this is what's happening. Okay, now what's really objectively happening, and now let's look at all of the objective findings, which is where all the technology comes in and all the tests comes in. And I'm not saying they're useless or not to do them, of course not, but it's like we need to take time to find out what's really happening, because contextualizing that is, the body is dying. Literally, that's a bad word, but we're programmed to heal, right? We want to heal.
That's right. We are programmed to heal. That's exactly right.
And so if a little bit more time was spent to connect with the patient, I think there'd be much better results and a lot less nocebo effect. When you when you come in and you're told doom and gloom, and the tests were, even the names of the tests, right? Oh, it's a positive result, which means it's negative for you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Hello.
I have that confusion in my office. I say, oh yeah, the results are negative. Oh no, doctor. No, 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 that's good. That's good. That's good.
Like, you would think you could just switch that around,
Mhm. Results are positive for you.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Good
who
for you.
came up? Yeah. But again, that really shows, the mindset that needs to change, right? And you
Mhm.
know, yeah, no, interesting. Okay, let me think of what else I would love to know. Well, I'm curious. Ventriloquist.
Good for you for
How
saying
on earth did that come up?
I was a ventriloquist before I was a doctor. I learned when I was probably 9 or 10 years old by seeing a ventriloquist on TV in Chicago, where I lived at the time. And I just gravitated to it. And I actually do ventriloquism in all my talks to doctors and nurses and PAs and other people, because it's fun and it's enjoyable. But people say, "Ooh, ventriloquist, you must be weird. You have a split personality." No, 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 no. None of that is true. Ventriloquism is a ventriloquist is simply an actor playing two parts simultaneously. That's all it is. You're creating two different characters interacting with each other, but you're both of the characters. What makes it fun and difficult is maybe the character is saying something in one tone of voice, but you have to show an entirely different reaction on your face. So if one of my characters is yelling at me, I have to be looking like this while the words that I'm saying, secretly, words that I'm saying are actually yelling at me. So what's wonderful about ventriloquism also is unlike magic, I call it, I'll try that again. I call it illusion without deception. In magic, the basis of magic, performance magic that is deception. I'm doing something secretly or something you're not aware of, or there's something more going on than you're aware of, or I'm not doing something that you think I am, whatever it may be. That's deception. Everybody accepts that. When you go to a magic show, you know that the woman isn't really being sawn in half. There's some level of deception.
Right.
Ventriloquism is illusion without deception. It's an illusion. If the ventriloquist does a good job, the character becomes real to the audience, and yet they know what's going on. They know that it's not real. They know it's a puppet, and yet they laugh at what the puppet says. They look at the puppet when the puppet is speaking. They start to act as like we talk about in performing, acting as if. I act as if the puppet is real. The puppet acts as if he or she is real, and then the audience acts as if the puppet is real. And that's what makes it fun. And so I love it. It's a very unique form of entertainment. It's a very ancient form of entertainment. And it's just so much fun to do.
So do you use this then for doctor-patient like education or?
I never did it in the office. The only time I ever did it in the office is that I had a little sock hand puppet. And if the patient came in with a kid, to reward the kid for having sat through mommy or daddy's doctor's appointment, I'd do a little magic for them, or I'd do some ventriloquism. But I never used it with patients. It was too distracting, I felt.
Okay. You wouldn't mind just pretending I'm a kid for a second and.
Well, I don't have any puppets with me at the moment.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I was not pre-warned. But if you allow me to talk in a puppet voice.
Go for it.
Well, I can tell you about Mrs. Lucille Goldman, who's a very cranky old lady who talks like this. And as you can see, part of it is just learning to talk without moving your lips, something like that.
That's an example. But it doesn't mean anything without the puppet being there. If you saw her talking, then it would become a character. So people think, oh, the art of ventriloquism is talking without moving your lips. No, the art of ventriloquism is creating another character right next to you.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was thinking too, when patients have to make decisions on hard decisions sometimes on, treatment choices or, disconnecting from life support or all of these things, that at one point or another, people have to decide. I just had this idea, but having puppets go through this.
Well, maybe, but I'll tell you, I have downstairs a framed copy of a cartoon from the New Yorker, and it shows a patient lying in bed in the hospital, and a doctor is sitting in a chair next to the bed, and on the doctor's knee is a ventriloquist puppet that looks like a doctor. And the caption under the cartoon is, "I'm afraid Mr. Bickles has some bad news for you." And so You know, yeah, I just don't think there's a role for that. It's, you know, I think it's just too serious. You know, those circumstances are too serious to have the patient concentrate, at least for me. Because for me, having the puppet there is just fun. And I just never brought that into the office. My patients knew that I did it, but I just never could see bringing it into that circumstance. Now, maybe I should have, you know, made a bolder choice, tried new things, and tried it, but I never did. I just felt no place.
Well, I was thinking it is Dr. Cousins, right? Who wears the clown outfit and the nose and.
Well, yeah, Patch Adams, I think it was.
Patch Adams, that's it.
Patch Adams, Patch Adams, I have, you know, what I understand of Patch Adams, Robin Williams made him out to be better and nicer than he perhaps really was, but I don't know enough to comment, but that's just what I sort of heard from people who knew him.
Because I know in my clinic, dealing with pain, because people come in a lot of pain, and pain is a somewhat serious matter. You know, if you're in pain, your life changes, right? And yeah, I use a lot of laughter. I mean, there has to be a level of connection for laughter to be safe and fun, you know. But I remember my secretary, who's been with me for years, and she goes, "Oh my gosh, it's so much fun. I would never have thought that a pain clinic would have so much laughter." Anyway, now she works in a funeral home. So,
probably less laughter there, I'm guessing.
Yeah, though she's kept the spirit of it, you know, and actually uses laughter to help.
Laughter is very important, and I think laughter is a very important tool. The laughter that I always used in the office, though, was laughter at myself.
Yes,
I think humor is very important, but I even talk about this in my book, that it can never be at the expense of the patient.
No. Oh no, that's not how I'm.
Yeah,
I think it's more.
We can laugh at the world, we can laugh at me, but we're not. You know.
No, we're not laughing, or sometimes at the insanity of the situation.
Right.
A little, but no, not at a person, because that's not funny, actually. You know? Now, what about hugging? I know these are odd questions, but we just got told that
I very frequently hug my patients at the end of visits. Very common. I think it's very important to touch men and women both.
Yeah.
Or if I hadn't seen them for a long time and they put their hand out, I said, "That's not good enough." You know.
Right.
You know, hugging is very important. It conveys a warmth that perhaps is second only to smiles in conveying warmth.
Because for me, it seems instinctual, and some of my patients will. Some of my patients will say, you know, "Is it okay if I ask you for a hug?" You know, and it's like, of course, you know. But we've just been told that no more hugging.
Well, I would never hug without asking permission. Always,
absolutely.
Absolutely. You know, yeah. Say, can I give you a hug, or you know, you just. And I've never had anyone say no, but I always ask for permission.
Yeah, but it's interesting, you know, how a lot of the connection pieces feel like we really have to make a concerted effort to become conscious, to keep that, you know, alive, and part of the
performance. It's, you know, part of the performance aspect of medicine is remembering all the tools at your disposal. Right. Tools like smiles and eye contact and hugs and body language. Those are all part of our toolbox, and we should use them as much as we use our medications and our tests.
I mean, they say, you know, medicine is an art and a science, right? But the art piece, which I believe is that flow, that connection, is really not studied very deeply. You know, it's anyway.
Yeah, interestingly enough, in medical schools, empathy now is being taught. You know, empathy is something that you can learn. You can learn the technique of empathy. When I was in school, it was never mentioned. Now it's being taught, which I think is terrific. And we're even understanding the neuroscience of empathy. There's a doctor at Mass General Hospital named Helen Reese who studies the neuroscience of empathy. And her work is very, very interesting. And from that, she's developed ways to teach people to be empathic, because empathy is really underlying a lot of what we've been talking about today.
Yeah. So how long are you still in practice at this stage, or?
I retired 3 years ago.
Oh, okay. And
I'm a full-time speaker, author, ventriloquist. and dad and husband.
7 kids, yes.
Right.
And so what decided you to move on from?
Three things happened simultaneously. Number one, I turned 65. Number two, my contract with my employer was up and would have to be renewed for 5 years if I wanted to continue. And number three, there were other things I wanted to do, and I did not want to be 72 years old and go, gee, I wonder if I could have.
Mm.
And a very dear friend of mine said something in her one-woman show that really struck me when I heard it. She said, all we have is the time between now and death.
Yeah.
And that made me think, yeah, I want to do these other things.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't looked back, and it's been great.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's interesting because it's different and it's similar from the way you've experienced it, you know. I guess a little less stress from the responsibility of patient care.
Right. And a little more stress not having my life completely regulated by every 15 minutes. I have a new task to perform, and I could walk in at the beginning of the day, look at my schedule, know exactly what my day was going to be like, yeah, including the personalities of the people I'd be dealing with. Yeah. Now I'm just freelancing, which is fun.
Yeah. Well, anyway, good for you. I think it's great, you know, because I feel like as long as we keep learning, I mean, to me, learning new things feeds me, you know, so that's why I was saying to you
things every day, wonderfully.
Yeah. Like, that's why, like, I was saying this TEDx talk, which I'm probably lost my voice. I have a form of laryngitis. It's pushing me to uncomfortable levels of.
Yes, that's good. It's good that you're pushing. As we say at Heroic Public Speaking, learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's really my my philosophy of life anyways. So, you know, and I think sometimes our illnesses and what we manifest are kind of signs or symbols of, you know, well, this is, you know, pay attention to this. This is what your body's actually telling you, you know. So, Bob, with all your years of practice, is there something that you feel that has really touched you or that you've really learned about being in practice?
Yes. When I retired, many patients said very nice things to me about things that I had done that I didn't even remember doing. One man said, you know, I first started coming to you after you saved my mother's life. He'd been my patient for 25 years. I had no recollection of having saved his mother's life. And what I realized is, from the people who said all these things to me, is that we have unbelievable effects on people's lives, that we become very important parts of people's lives. And even though in our profession we are now facing all sorts of stresses regarding reimbursements and insurance and pharmacy benefit managers and licensing and all that stuff, when it's all said and done, there will be thousands and thousands of people whose lives are better because they met us. What more could you ask for in life?
Yeah, no, very true. It is true. It's again the human perspective, which is really what you bring to your patients and to your practice.
Absolutely.
So anyway, thank you very much for taking.
Thank you for having me, and I hope it's useful to you and your viewers and clientele and your patients and other people that you.
No, I think I'm really looking to inspire people on this path.
I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Okay. Yes,
thanks for having me, Manon. I really appreciate it. It was great. Really a lot of fun.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Dr. Manon. For more information, go to drmanonbolliger.com.